Good morning and welcome to the Standing Committee meeting for Wednesday, April 7th, 2021. Council will continue to meet virtually until further notice. Meetings can now be viewed live on the city channel and live streamed on YouTube. Our first order of business is public comment. I would like to remind all speakers that the rules of council state that comments are limited to matters of concern, official action, or deliberation, which are or may be before city council. Profanity will not be permitted. Our first speaker of today is Shaman Pomai. Is Shaman Pomai with us? Double checking the participants. I do not see her. Our next speaker will be Ikuhana Halmalkina.
Greetings of peace, light, and love. My title is Ikahana Hal Makina. I am the Grand Inca of the Iroquois Confederacy of Aborigine American People. I have been in this region for 45 years. And I would like to speak about the swift actions of the city in response to hate. Over the weekend, I participated with the Bears, as I do in the community quite often, and I don't usually talk about what I do. I just do. I just take action. So I was participating by being involved with the children who were doing an egg hunt, filming them laughing, collecting eggs with excitement, bouncing on bouncing houses that was provided by the neighborhood association, the Bears coaches, and other leaders in the community, such as myself. And it was very disheartening to see the hatred to follow that action. We were there on Saturday, and by Sunday, the hate had come. But I would like to applaud the city for responding swiftly to erase the hatred and despicable marks left by an unknown assailant. What I am disappointed in by the city is the lack of swift and immediate redress to the indigenous people. We've been on this line speaking for a whole year about wrongs that need to be righted. And yet again, another member of mine has had their automobile stolen by the city. No notice, no knocking on the door, no asking questions about the automobile as if it was in someone's way and could you move it. It was just stolen. These acts, these egregious acts, need to stop. My members are being harassed. Doors kicked in about feral cat. A feral cat is a wild stray cat. It didn't belong to my member, but yet the city of Pittsburgh police found it necessary to put a foot through his door. The Office of Municipal Investigations is slow to react, and the city of Pittsburgh is slow to react, to redress a wrong. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of meeting Bruce Krause. It was a pleasure to meet you. And before I could shake the hand of Teresa Kell Smith, she was gone.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Carmen Brown. Ms. Brown, you're currently on mute. I do see Ms. Brown, but she's, for whatever reason, still on mute. We can move to our next speaker as hopefully she works out any technical issues. Our next speaker is Kim Wilkes.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Kim Wilkes. I'd like to talk about the Heron Avenue corridor. About it being run down. For one thing, the Martin Luther King, what is it called? The reading center, the formal reading center of Martin Luther King up on Heron Avenue. I would like to request that that would be considered for a neighborhood community center. That was a beautiful brand new building that's been left to blight and destruction and weeds. And it also had a nice, what was it called? A planter beside it. It had a nice greenhouse beside it that I thought was the community was using. But now the place is just abandoned and it's a shame. That was a brand new building and it should be used as a community center for the Hill District, a fully serviced, full-time community center. That's a nice building. And then as you come further up the corridor, there's that old gas station there that's been run down for years. And then you come further down the hill, the street is really bad and they keep putting like a skim over it, but that street goes really bad fast. Then you come down to the busway, Martin Luther King busway. That used to be really nice and well maintained. Now the Martin Luther King plaque is removed. It's in a rundown condition. The Heron Avenue Bridge right there at the Martin Luther King busway, they're starting to graffiti the bridge, the Jersey barrier there. It would be nice if they could paint that Jersey barrier and beautify it. Also, as you get to the Heron Avenue Bridge, that street that goes down right at the bridge, Ravine Street, that's right at the busway. All the lights are out on that busway a lot of times. And also there's sections of the railing that have been knocked out. And that's a 15 to 20 foot drop that any child could drop through that fence right down onto the busway. And nothing's been done about it. I had them put Jersey barriers up there, but now it impedes with me getting my garbage picked up because the garbage truck doesn't want to make that corner. And I asked them to replace the iron railing. They said, "Oh, we can't find iron railing. That's not a hard thing they still make that." And also, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 sections knocked out now. And it's right at the end of Linoleum Way. You could drive off there in the ice right over, but that's where the Jersey barriers are. And they should come down, redo those fences. Also, 3326 Ravine, that's a condemned, abandoned property. It's delinquent, 4 years delinquent on its taxes. It's been several times reported to 311 and the committee for community center for having trash and garbage in the yard and for being in bad shape. I've tried to get it tore down. I tried to get it demolished. I tried to even get it clean and mean because the yard is full of house waste and yard waste, and nothing's been done about it.
Thank you. We'll now go back to Carmen Brown. Ms. Brown, are you with us? I see you in attendance, but you're on mute.
Try *6 maybe.
*6. Take yourself off of mute. Okay. David, if for whatever reason something gets worked out, we can try to take her at the end of the meeting. Having exhausted our registered speakers, we'll move on to our standing committee agenda. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Mr. Burgess,
Here.
Mr. Coghill,
Here.
Mr. Kraus,
Here.
Mr. O'Connor,
Here.
Mrs. Cale Smith, Mrs. Strasburger,
Here.
Mr. Wilson,
Here.
Mr. Lavelle Chair.
Here.
I think you missed Councilwoman Gross.
Councilwoman Gross.
Hi, yes, I'm finally here. Thank you.
8 members present.
Thank you. Our first committee of the day is Finance and Law, which is chaired by myself. We have one deferred paper, Bill 1331.
Bill 1331, resolution authorizing the issuing of a warrant in favor of MGT of America Consulting LLC in the amount of $32,500 relating to a case filed in the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Bill is recommended. First new paper, Bill 1350.
Bill 1350, resolution authorizing the issuing of a warrant in favor of Wheels, Inc. in the amount of $36,256.95 in settlement of a claim for damage to a vehicle from a 3-vehicle accident on PASR 2230 involving a City of Pittsburgh Environmental Services vehicle.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Bill is recommended. Bill 1351.
Bill 1351, resolution amending resolution 343 of 2020, which authorized the mayor and the city solicitor to enter into a professional services agreement with Campbell Durant for professional legal services and expert advice regarding labor matters by increasing the total spend by $50,000 to a new not to exceed amount of $390,000.
Motion to hold for executive session.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Bill will be held for executive session. That takes us to invoices. Need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Invoices are approved. We need a motion to approve the interdepartmental transfers.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Transfers are approved. And we need a motion to approve our P cards.
Motion to approve.
Excuse me, second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? P cards are approved. That takes us to our Public Works Committee chaired by Mr. Coghill. First new paper is Bill 1346.
Bill 1346, resolution authorizing the mayor and directors of the Department of Public Works and of Finance on behalf of the city to enter into an agreement with Peoples Natural Gas Company to provide a permanent easement for additional and/or relocated natural gas pipelines and necessary accessories at the Southside Park as a part of a joint city People Natural Gas project to improve the Southside Park in the Southside neighborhood.
Motion to approve.
Yes, second. Just very brief discussion. I believe Friends of Southside Park are all in agreement with this. We've reached out to a number of people, had conversations. Just in case there is some minor adjustment that might need to be made, I may ask for recommittal on Tuesday, but at this stage, I'd ask very much if members would support. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Bill is recommended. Bill 1347.
Bill 1347, resolution amending resolution 145, 2019, which authorizes the mayor and director of Office of Management and Budget and the director of the Department of Public Works to enter into an agreement with Quetica for professional services relating to fleet telematics and snow route optimization by extending the term for 2 years at an increase of $384,376 for a new cost not to exceed $2,116,208.
Motion for a brief discussion.
Second.
Okay. Yeah, this is to do with the tracking system, I imagine, and I am not in favor of it, but just wanted to open up to other members if they had any comments.
Councilwoman Strasburger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to hear what our plans are to improve upon this system. And I know that there have been some glitches in the past. I'd love to just to hear a little bit about what we've learned from that experience this last winter and what we're already doing and what we will do in the future, given that this is the same vendor, to improve upon the snow plow tracking system so that everyone understands why we're going, where we're going, and how much salt has been dropped, and what, where we're plowing, all of that. So I'm happy to, Acting Director Hornstein or Director Paulus, whoever can answer that question for me.
I believe Director Hornstein wants to begin.
Oh, thank you, everyone. Chris Hornstein, Acting Director of Public Works. To the point, yes, we've had our challenges with the snowplow optimization software to this point. And I think we have done a lot of work correcting that issue. So on those fronts, we have worked with the vendor to do better quality control. There are particular challenges with the trucks and equipment ourselves that we're working to resolve internally. That involves, getting new certain salt spreaders for certain trucks that allow for better control, better reporting. I will say that, from the perspective of, tracking progress, extremely useful for the from the perspective of, understanding the amount of salt that's being put down on the streets and that it's appropriate and it's applicable, while still giving our drivers, the freedom to kind of make that call in the field based on their, personal, experience, which I think is really crucial here. Very beneficial. I think the other piece that we're seeing as we go through, optimization and reporting is that this gives us a baseline to have some more in-depth conversations with PennDOT, whereby we can, improve some of our responsiveness in certain areas of the city, where we can be a little bit more responsive to residents and have a more detailed, focused conversation backed up by data. I think that's really, really important. I think that will help save our drivers time, save the, get better snow response into neighborhoods in general.
So thank you for that. What I'm hearing is quality control, and is that quality control then by DPW leadership or by, the drivers themselves over the technology, or who's doing the quality control?
So the quality control
optimization technology.
Right. So the quality control on the optimization is kind of a three-pronged effort. So it is DPW leadership. So I'm directly involved with INP, who is kind of spearheading and building the optimization of that piece. And then we take feedback directly from supervisors and drivers on how the route optimization is crafted. And, I've specifically instructed supervisors and drivers, with the optimized route, our goal here is to make sure that, drivers are finishing up a route when they're mostly out of salt. And so no optimized route is going to cover all of the particular instances of snow or ice that a driver might experience. So the drivers do have some latitude to, kind of make a call in the field, while at the same time, understanding what their responsibility is. And so that's the hope of the technology. We are finalizing the deployment of the tablets now into the trucks, and we've already completed that testing. So we're already getting feedback now as to, the interface with the devices in the truck to the driver's benefit, and crafting that in. So to answer your question, Councilperson, it is a three-pronged effort between DPW leadership, INP, and then the, supervisors and drivers in the field in terms of quality control with the vendor.
Thank you. I'm generally supportive of this technology. I think it's important to understand. It's for a few reasons. One, so that we as council offices can be communicating with the public and saying, here's where we're seeing a snowplow. Yes, they have come to your street. They probably will come back again, and be communicating that. Second, to ensure that there's not favoritism in one part of town over another, so we can demonstrate that we're using data and actually show where the trucks are and where the salt's been spread. And three, to look at the data afterwards and assess where, how improvements can be made for the next snowfall. but I'm glad that you said that there's latitude, because I also think that data isn't everything, that the wisdom of the drivers and the institutional memory and knowledge is really important to listen to too. So I'm glad that there is some latitude there to allow them to make decisions as necessary. So that sounds good. I look forward to seeing how we can continue to improve next winter. Thank you.
Thank
Sure.
you. Councilman Coghill?
Yes. Hey, Chris, thanks for being here. I guess I don't want to sound like an old prude, but the tracking system, I know there's many good things about it. I know that the supervisors can see what streets are done in real time and where they're at. There's also things that were not so good about it, like when they weren't showing up on the tracking system. I had people calling from the neighborhood, why does Brookline only have 2 salt trucks when, Manchester has 20? So it really caused me more work than what it was worth for me. I spent many days, Director, just calling people back and trying to explain, oh, well, it's not showing up on the system because the truck's not going fast enough. Well, the truck's not going fast enough because it's going down a grade 28% graded hill, and it can only go 4 or 5 miles per hour. So I guess, has that been corrected, or is it next year? Are we going to be dealing with that same thing?
No, it's in the process of being corrected. Some of that is some of the trucks by nature of as you're familiar with this term, Councilman, the salt hogs. We're having real difficulty with reporting with that technology. We're switching those out. We're going to a different in-bed salt hog for those trucks that will work better with our system. So that's going to be happening this year. So some of it is, the GPS devices weren't necessarily reporting, especially on some of the newer trucks where they hadn't quite been installed. And we were just, because of the amount of snowfall this year, we were pressed to get those trucks into service as fast as possible. I would also say that, I can understand that concern that you would have and that citizens would have but I do think, in my response to some citizens' complaints for your district, extremely helpful for me to go back and look at the data and see where folks have been, to either validate their concern or just, have a conversation on fault.
Yeah. And I wish we would, as far as the salt distribution goes and regulating that, and it was great that we upped it from 400 pounds per mile to 800 pounds. But I think a lot of that has to be for the judgment of the driver. So many, every snowfall, ice storm is different. Some require more salt, some require less salt. So all depends on the temperature and variable amount of factors there. But yeah, so I just don't like the drivers being, controlled by a computer, and when they know better, I feel. So again, I will say there are some good things about it. The GPS, the supervisors being able to, see what roads have been done, which roads have not. But for me, it's just caused a lot of aggravation. Before the tracker system, it seemed like we were doing just fine, just by maybe some drivers dumped too much salt, maybe some didn't do enough, but that's why we have people in the field checking on it and, regulating that and, hopefully getting it down where, not to a science, it's never going to be to a science, but, where the drivers are doing the right thing. And I just always feel like it's better left to the driver because they're out there in the condition themselves than to a computer. So yeah, I have a hard time supporting it. That's right up there with smart garbage cans for me. I know they both have their advantages, but I think the disadvantages that come with them kind of nullify that. So just my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there other members for discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Councilwoman Gross?
thank you. Director, it's good to see you. And I feel like this is kind of an annual conversation. I don't know that we usually have it in April, right? But it's this kind of like moving parts between what our fleet looks like and what the needs actually are in the street. I think it's what I'm hearing is that it's not independent of just the technology deployment. We know that we are trying to modernize our fleets. We know that we have a significant number of vehicles that are out for repairs because we haven't kept up with replacement cycles of the fleet. Would you like to take an opportunity to readdress that for me? And here's my very layperson's understanding, which is I'm not a sophisticated understanding of the types of vehicles that we use in DPW. And so I apologize for asking the same questions kind of every year, and I need help with the vocabulary and understanding the proportions of the different types of vehicles for snow removal. But I see smaller, more nimble vehicles in other cities. And they are certainly newer vehicles, and that's a challenge for us. But also, we have very demanding territory, especially in the steep streets. We've had dangerous situations for our employees and for the public. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about where we are in modernization and what council needs to know.
Okay, absolutely. I'd love to talk about modernization. So to answer some of your questions, we basically have three types of vehicles that we use for snow operations. So that would be what we colloquially call like a 10-ton pickup, a 10-ton truck, a 5-ton truck, and then basically a pickup which has an attachment on it that has the salt bin and the spreader, sometimes called a salt hog. And those are the three types of things. And so by and large, the most vehicles we have of that are pickups, which are the smaller vehicles that are useful for navigating areas like your district in Lawrenceville, where the streets are very narrow. And the large vehicles are very useful for wider streets. And plus they hold more salt so they can cover more area. So they are an efficiency. And so, that is another piece where the optimization helps us. And that we can go back and look at the data and say, okay, we might not necessarily have our street or our routes constructed optimally for maximum service to the citizen. So getting the snow off the street as fast as possible. And that's one of the things the data is beginning to tell us as I look at it with INP and with the vendor. In terms of modernization, so we were able to get 13 vehicles that we prioritized for snow ops this year. And this is going to be an ongoing thing. So in the past, as I went back and looked at the history with the Office of Management and Budget staff, with our fleet maintenance folks, basically what used to happen historically was that we would get an influx of cash and we would replace, say, all the trucks in a particular division. Really what needs to happen in order to do this correctly, and it's something that I'm committed to, is making an annual investment in the equipment so that our drivers, instead of having trucks that consistently break down or the heat doesn't work in the cab, or we drop an axle when we're going up a hill and creating a dangerous situation for the driver, that they're always outfitted with, the reasonably newer vehicles. We know the newer vehicles work better with the technology, so it's in our favor to do that. And that just helps us. It helps us in so many ways. I can't tell you the amount of downtime that we have due to vehicle maintenance for public works. It really is challenging for us to deal with. Roughly, I believe in 2019, I haven't yet looked at the data for 2020, but in 2019, I believe we lost approximately, 40% of our time. Our vehicles were down for roughly 40% of the time, which is really, really high and just speaks to the age of our fleet. And so we do need to modernize. I am committed to modernizing. We're tackling that through a variety of ways, whether that's via grants, whether that's, augmenting, funding sources to help figure this problem out and solving the problem. Because honestly, at the end of the day, that's just what puts our drivers on the streets as soon as possible if we have reliable equipment. And, it's something that our drivers have been speaking of for years, and I'm happy to kind of carry the torch for them.
I thought we'd improved I thought, it sounds maybe that we've gotten worse. I mean, I had a kind of number in my head of 20 or 30% of the time that the fleet was kind of out of commission. So when we talk about time, that means that like at any given moment, those 20 to 30%, or what I'm hearing is 40% of those vehicles are just unavailable. So we're working at almost half capacity.
Mhm.
Okay, so let me just ask an out of the box question, because that was not the answer I was expecting. 10-ton trucks, this is just snow removal. God knows we've got other issues with, for everything from police vehicles to, we've made investments in fire vehicles and fire stations. We've made investments in other categories in the fleet. So we're just talking now about the snow removal. But those trucks are used for other things the rest of the year, are they not? Some of those?
Oh, absolutely. They're
Maybe
used
10
here.
ton, 5-ton, and so help me with that. So I don't
Yeah,
want
absolutely.
to picture them like parked for 9 months of the year.
No, they're not parked 9 months of the year. They're
Okay.
used year round. The larger trucks are used to haul, hot asphalt in the summer, as well as just clearing material and debris. Are they used, 24/7, 365? No, but they're
Well,
used.
hopefully not, because
Yeah,
they
they'll run
wouldn't
out,
they would last half as long, right?
exactly. But they're used year round.
So 10-ton trucks, 5-ton trucks, and pickups. Again, this is not my daily world, but it's really important for the public and council to know about this. So if we were to replace the whole fleet, right? So we've been replacing incrementally. What is the whole fleet if it were brand new? Just like, what's the math on that?
To be honest, I don't have that data right up in front of me.
Director Paulus, I mean, you know how many vehicles there are in each of those, just 3 types, and you know roughly what each of them costs.
Yes, Kevin Bowles, Director of Office Management and Budget.
Thank you for being here. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I do not have the number off the top of my head of what it would cost to replace the entire fleet. I do know that I've been working with Brandon Walton, who is the manager of our fleet, and to get on a 12-year replacement cycle, 10 to 12-year replacement cycle would be roughly $12 to $14 million per year for our fleet. But that's to modernize the entire city fleet. And
okay, not just
regularly
this
scheduled.
trucks.
It's not specific to DPW.
Okay. So, all right, let's just say it's half of that. So that's $6 million a year. And if you do it every 10 years, I'm just going to make up a number. $60 million would easily cover all new trucks of 5-ton, 3-ton, 10-ton, 5-ton, and pickup. Please forgive me for not being so fluent about trucks. Right. So I just want to kind of get my mind around that number. And I'm sure you will always remind us, and we should always remind the public, that you can look up the plan in the capital budget and the ELA. So trucks wouldn't be under DPW. So you wouldn't look there if you pulled up on your computer right now, the capital budget. You'd have to find the Equipment Leasing Authority budget, right? And so where do we know where that is? If I right now, I'm poking around on my computer. Is it at the back of the capital budget or something?
No, I have the 2021 capital budget pulled up here on my second screen. It's labeled the Capital Equipment Acquisition. Is the project name in the capital budget.
Thank you. Okay. Right. So we did discuss all of these budgets and all of our budget hearings in the fall, and voted on the capital budgets. And so that's what we're working with. But there is a separate authority, that is the Equipment Leasing Authority, that recommends these purchases to council. So like I said, we have this discussion more than once a year, but it's inefficient, not just for the employees and not just for the service that people are getting, right? That we're falling short on the results on the roads, but just to be having equipment at the First Fleet what is that called? Are they still doing our servicing, our service provider?
They're called First Vehicle Services.
Yeah,
First
First
Vehicle
Vehicle.
Services, right? To have them always at First Vehicle Services. Yeah, it's not really smart spending. And, I've voted on these capital budgets myself for 7 years. So I just want to kind of just say that's, I think we're in the financial shape now where we can do better. We should be bringing that number down. So I think that for me, it's interrelated to the technology problem. So I'm supportive of this measure today. But I've been in the same situation where I'm like frantically looking at the snowplow tracker and wondering where all my trucks are. And it helps to be able to explain that, especially on the narrow streets in my district, if they're the smaller pickup trucks, then maybe they're not being tracked as well. Said because some of those are the ones with the salt hogs, and maybe that's part of that problem. So I think that's all my questions for now. I appreciate your indulging me having to ask these questions all over again. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other members for first round? Seeing none, second round, Councilman Coghill. You're on mute, Councilman.
Sorry about that. When we talk about the salt hogs, the pickup trucks, when I look at the number that we're spending for the modernization and the tracking system at $2.1 million, and I'm just doing my own guesstimation here. I mean, we're talking about, putting maybe if we put that money into new vehicles, the smaller, nimbler ones that Councilwoman Gross had mentioned, which I feel we need more of, newer ones too, just because of the streets and cars are parked on both sides of the street, and we end up in a lot of lawsuits and accidents and things like that because of that reason. So we're talking 24 brand new vehicles we could use, or we could buy somewhere in that ballpark. What's a salt hog go for fully equipped with the spreader on it and everything else? I'm figuring 50,000-60,000 a piece. Is that somewhere in the ballpark?
I don't know exactly what fully upfitted. I will say that the updated pickup trucks, if I were to estimate, it would probably be, right in that ballpark of 65,000. That covers the cost for the vehicle and the cost for the upfitting, which includes the salt spreader and the salt hog, which carries the salt on the back.
Right. I, for one, would rather have 26 new vehicles on the road and have our supervisor or somebody going out just to make sure that all the streets are hit like we did before computers, So yeah, I'd much rather see that being put into new equipment, new vehicles. I know we talked about, the Public Works Division that we will be building this summer, and I would love to see newer, smaller, nimbler fleet there. And, we went through the budget, and I know you have only so much to work with, but yeah, I for one would be, happy to transfer that money and buy new vehicles. Everybody gets 3 new vehicles. Just my thoughts.
Thank you. Any further discussion for second round?
First, Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Smith.
President Smith.
Thank you. I just, I want to echo Councilman Coghill's comments that I think that we need the equipment, and I know our drivers can do a great job if we work with them and allow them to do their job. I really think that the snowplow tracker and some of the equipment this past year has absolutely caused a lot of concern and a lot of disgruntled employees. And so I just like to know how you're working with them and making them feel more comfortable in the technology and using the technology, because I really feel like a lot of them feel like it's always equipment that's using for an I gotcha moment and not really beneficial to helping them. There was a lot of glitches that I understood with this last season, and trying to make sure that the drivers were doing the routes the way that they should have been doing. But there's certain things like if a truck has to back up and some other things. And I know that you were coming up with new routes. And I do want to say, I did hear a lot of compliments about some of the streets that typically weren't getting done, that were getting done this past year. because the routes were changed, but then there were also people that were uncertain about the snow routes and why they weren't done. So there was a lot of concern about that. I actually think we need more dialogue about this before we just pass this.
Thank you.
So could somebody tell me, could somebody answer, how are you working with the employees on the training and on making them feel valued and not feel as if this is an I gotcha moment and you're using it for discipline versus just benefiting better snowplow services for the residents?
Yeah, I don't consider that tracking as a disciplinary measure, Council President. I
Well, you
believe
might not, but some of the employees do.
I understand that, and it's in my plan for this year to reach out and to visit every division in person to discuss the snow plow technology and what our expectations are for them and for their supervisors. And I'll tell you, it's actually really beneficial to the city and to the drivers. We use it to protect them. We had a terrible accident on the Birmingham Bridge this past winter where one of our drivers miraculously walked away, but it could have very easily been not the case. But with the GPS technology, we were able to, look at that from a claims perspective and say, hey, our driver wasn't doing anything wrong. This is all another driver's fault of what happened here. And so we're able to, protect them in a lot of cases when certain issues come up. Or, sometimes, quite honestly, we get, fraudulent complaints against our drivers where maybe they have struck a vehicle. And I got to say, from my perspective, our drivers, I found them all to be, for the most part, very honest people, forthright about what happened out on the street. And we're able to, combat some of those fraudulent claims just by having the knowledge that the driver wasn't even in the area when the resident was saying that they struck their vehicle. So, those are the types of things that we do.
I'm sorry. I actually know of an incident in my district where somebody was claiming that the driver was speeding by and some other things that happened. And when they went back and reviewed it, they realized that the driver was not in the wrong. So it actually protected the driver then too. But I also think those cases are few and far between, where people are hearing more of disciplinary actions and things that are happening. And to be honest, I think our residents want to see our drivers out working. They don't want to know that they're parked somewhere and not doing what they need to do. And I know that that's part of what you can do with this, but it also makes our drivers feel, I think, a lot of times devalued and unappreciated for the difficult job that they do. And I think with seeing the leadership in DPW now, where there's a lot of people who haven't come up through the ranks, who haven't done the job, who don't know what it's like to do these very intense labor jobs, and working long shifts trying to get the streets cleaned with old equipment and on hillsides and cars parked on both sides, who don't understand what that's like. That sometimes you just may need a break. I think that that's the part where they feel devalued, and I think that's where it's being misused. So, and I do hear what you're saying, but I think I personally am going to abstain today till I feel more comfortable in that and how this is going to be used in terms of discipline.
Understood. And look, the driving is in the snow event is an extremely difficult job. That's why, in my first conversations when I became acting director, I wanted to make sure that the drivers understood and their supervisors understood that when it comes to plowing the route and it comes to the technology, the technology is there as an assist. It's to help the driver make sure they're getting all the streets that they need to get. When it's dark, when it's the middle of the night, when the street signs are covered, you have a piece of paper that you have to refer to, it gets extremely difficult. And I would think that the technology would help them do that. Do we have an expectation that they're going to drive every route as assigned perfectly in the order it is? No, I don't, because to the point, our drivers are very experienced. They absolutely 100% need to be safe when they're on the road. And so I would expect them, if they encounter a situation where the computer or the technology is telling them to do something that is not safe, then I just want to reinforce to you and all of them out there now that is absolutely not the case of the technology. That's not the intent. The intent is to assist them in their duties, to help them be making sure that they cover everything that they need to cover. And to help us, we can't have eyes everywhere. I only have a limited number of supervisory staff, so it does help us give an additional set of eyes to, just to make sure that, things are happening in an appropriate way.
And I would also say, I'm going to just add my last comment is I'd also like to see the money going into equipment. And I've been having those conversations with Director Paulus as well. So I'm going to abstain today and finish these conversations over the week. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members? Second round?
I also have some questions now. Thank you.
All right, Councilwoman Gross, second round, and I saw Councilman Coghill, third round. Councilwoman Gross?
So to that point, I think I need help now with the math on the dollars. The title reads, extending the term for 2 years at an increase of 384,376. So I suppose that's, what, roughly 190,000 each year. And then the new cost not to exceed $2,116,208. So I'm embarrassed to say I hadn't really stopped to think about that. Is that costing us $1 million a year for just snow plow tracking? Or what is housed in this contract? Or do I have the numbers mixed up?
This legislation is to amend the original contract that had one-time costs for the implementation and install of the equipment. So what we are proposing today is to extend the contract for another 2 years. And you were correct with that yearly amount of $190,000 in each of the last 2 years. So 2021 and 2022. That larger not to exceed amount, we essentially add the 384,000 on top of the original contracted amount that already covered the install of the equipment 3 years ago when we entered into the original contract.
So the annual operating, what do you call that?
The annual allocation for the GPS and route optimization and monthly recurring costs is $190,000 each year for the next 2 years.
Okay. So there were upfront, like you said, equipment and installation costs, kind of like when you're getting cable at your house and they make you pay for the box and the router and the service fee and the labor and all that. But then after that, you have your monthly service. Got it.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. That sounds a lot better than $1 million a year. So I'm glad I asked. Thank you.
Glad we could clear that up for you.
Thank you. Any further members? Second round? Third round, Councilman Coghill.
Yes, see, Councilwoman Gross, you don't need to know trucks. You just need to know figures. And you certainly know those. So, but let me just break it down, Chris, if I could. So the tracking system, what are we tracking? It's a salt distribution and GPS. I know of those two. What else is involved there? Is that just the two components?
I mean, those are the two basic components. I'll say that they'll, track reporting, making sure that the devices are reporting back to the GPS. They will track the runtime. They will track the vehicle speed, vehicle direction, heading, kind of all those things that come with that's what's known as the AVL, the automatic vehicle locator, is capable of kind of performing all that, as well as tracking up to 24 hours of where the vehicle has been.
See, I'm all, I know it's a data-driven world these days. And I know data can be very useful and it could save us money as well. But I point back to data can sometimes be costly and, inefficient. I just find the tracking system, I'd much rather have new vehicles out there and supervisors and going over the routes to make sure that drivers are, know where they're at, where we don't have to depend on GPS. I know many of the drivers personally, and they know every alley, they know every street. They don't need a GPS, and they know probably a better route than the GPS gives them. I know many cases, Chris, GPS sends them to a street, but they're bypassing, and they're backtracking to go back to the streets that the GPS didn't direct them to. So whether that be tertiary roads or main roads, I know that all factors in, but I hate to see a driver plow a street and then pass two side streets that desperately need plowed, to go, to I guess our system is to, doing the main roads first. So I just would love to sit down and rethink the whole thing, at least for the Fourth Public Works Division. But I don't mean to be critical about it. I just, when I see, $2 million over however many years going into a tracking system, I think, boy, we can really use new trucks, new plows, new salt spreaders. So that's it for me.
No, I can certainly understand your concerns, Councilman. And I think that, as I looked at the new optimized routes in the version 2 that's being built, based on the previous guidance that we gave the vendor, the idea is to get away from that doing that primary, secondary, tertiary, and really get into the neighborhoods more. So you have a lot less of those driving past streets. The other thing that I'll point out that the technology enables us, that no technology would have, is that, and this, Councilman, that we lose, people get hurt on the job. People go out for health reasons or for a variety of other important reasons. And so sometimes when there's a manpower issue for your district, we have to mobilize labor from another division to assist you. And we're happy to do that, happy to help out. Having that technology in the vehicle for a driver that might not necessarily be familiar with your district as an assist to help out our citizens, very critical, absolutely critical. I mean, we're driving around your district, some of the challenging streets that you have with the terrain, with the sharp turns. It's not easy to navigate for an experienced driver that's familiar with the terrain, but take an experienced driver who might not be familiar with the neighborhood, and it gets really challenging for them, particularly at night. And so, the technology does enable us to, do some resource allocation when necessary to kind of balance the workforce out for the entire city.
Yeah, and perhaps, Chris, I need to learn more about the tracking system myself, what the advantages are and what they're not. Just going through this past winter, for me, it was a disadvantage because hours a day, every day during the snowstorms, I was explaining why they're not showing up on the tracker, why they're not putting enough salt down, where are they? But in talking about what you were saying, rethinking how we plow our streets, how we do the streets, to me, I almost would rather resort back to plowing secondary streets first. The main roads are heavily traveled. That helps keep the snow off of them. I mean, always we need to keep the emergency routes clear. I understand that. But, the alleys, the small streets where people need to get out onto the roads in order to make it to work, I think that's just as important. I hate to categorize them as, a secondary street that gets hit 3 days later. It's they're all important, they all have homes on them and people need to get to work. So yeah, I just am uncomfortable in voting for it today. I'm not necessarily saying throw the thing out by any means. Maybe I need to learn more about it on my end as to what the tracking system advantages are, and sit down and have that conversation with you before the snow flies again.
I'd be happy to.
Yep.
Thank you. Third round, Councilman Kraus.
Thank you. Just briefly, I'm in support and I will vote in favor of the legislation today, but I do have a quick question/comment. Am I oversimplifying to say that our street prioritization plan is still reactionary to the Snowmageddon event? That was, everything changed after Snowmageddon, and we did this huge, I see Councilwoman Gross smiling, but I think I don't think I'm that far off base, that it was such a devastating event, and rightfully so. There were major changes made to how we prioritize roads for plow removal or for snow removal. And as Councilman Coghill said, always emergency routes are going to be first, and those are non-negotiable. But perhaps it is time 10 years after the event to re-examine exactly what our commitment is in terms of prioritization of our, our primary, secondary and tertiary streets. Just a comment. That's all. I just wanted to put it out there. And again, I will support today.
Thank you. Any further members? If not, quick question for you, which is sort of related to what Councilman Kraus mentioned. Prior to next winter, Director Hornstein, would we be able to sort of see the anticipated routes that are being put together to then be able to weigh in and provide comment?
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. I mean, we're still in the process of finalizing some of those, but I would happily share those with council.
Okay, I think that'd be helpful. Thank you. If no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? One no. Any abstentions?
Abstain.
And one abstention. The bill is recommended. Thank you all. That takes us to our Human Resources Committee chaired by Councilman Kraus. First, one supplemental paper, Bill 1369.
Bill 1369, resolution providing for the issuing of a warrant in favor of Pittsburgh Mailing in the amount of $7,175 for open enrollment printing services provided to the Department of Human Resources and Civil Service due to the print shop closure during the pandemic.
Motion to approve, please.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thanks, everybody.
Any opposed? Bill is recommended. That takes us to our Urban Recreation Committee chaired by Councilman Burgess. First new paper, Bill 1344.
Bill 1344, resolution authorizing the mayor and director of the Department of Parks and Recreation to enter on behalf of the city into an agreement with the Pittsburgh Baseball Umpires Association in the amount of $6,000 for umpire services during the 2021 calendar year.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Bill is recommended. Bill 1345.
Bill 1345, resolution authorizing the city's Department of Parks and Recreation to enter into relevant agreements with Sonatrol for security through video monitoring and alarm systems, along with repairs at parks and recreation facilities at set negotiated prices to be determined over a term of 3 years.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none.
Oh, Mr. Chair, sorry, I was
Oh.
raising my hand, sorry.
Sorry. Councilman Gross.
Thank you. Hi, Director. I'm happy to see you here. I just wanted to give you a chance to talk about the deployment of the camera systems. I'm assuming it says video monitoring and alarm systems, and if you're going to be expanding the systems. And just to remind you that we were trying to get cameras at Shulo Park, that section, especially under the Bloomfield Bridge, where we'd have repeated requests for monitoring. So could you tell us a little bit about this bill and introduce yourself? Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Ross Chapman, Director of Parks and Recreation. Nice to see you all. Yes, Councilwoman, the Sonatrol system is a legacy system. It predates me. It's the vendor that has provided some burglary alarm systems as well as some cameras at some of our facilities. By no means are all Parks and Recreation program spaces equipped as perhaps they should be. Some have cameras, some don't. Some have burglar alarm systems, some don't. Most of the equipment is pretty old. It's rather dated. Some of it's tied to DVR type systems that are inadequate. But it's long been the case that Sonatrol is kind of that sole source provider that is providing some level of service which we can afford. I think we expend about $19,000 or so annually, approximately, to support the current systems. But at some point, we're going to have to make a decision to move from more of an analog-based system to a digital system. 4G, 5G, all this stuff is impacting what they're able to support. Kind of larger picture is recent conversations with public safety and Acting Director Hornstein and INP as we work to create a proposal of sorts as to what this could look like and perhaps should look like more universally, more holistically, as a real camera system that is probably not Sonatrol supported, could be, I guess, might look like to have at other facilities. We all know that most of us know that there is a need to have some additional cameras in a lot of places, whether they're protecting city assets or looking after kind of making sure that those folks that we're engaging in a public space are safe and secure. We really don't have that infrastructure in place right now. Much of that is due to what I understand is there's not a lot of there's not the proper bandwidth and connectivity speed at a lot of the locations. So even if we were to have money to secure the equipment, there has to be a lot of back-end INP work that has to be done first. So this is basically to maintain what the department has had in place for some time. There are a couple of spaces, facilities that we have to look at this year probably, which may cost us another few $100s. It shouldn't be that much to upgrade. Working with the Sonatrol folks right now. But this is kind of a Band-Aid approach to hopefully something that there can be a larger, more systematic view as to how this can be deployed throughout the city. I know that Chris has mentioned there's a need to protect some of the investment that you all were just talking about relative to new equipment. And this stuff's not inexpensive to procure. So it would be nice to work towards that. It will not be cheap and it will not be short term, especially when it comes to all of the IT kind of assessment work that has to be done. But there are planning stages. I have a couple more meetings next week. We're going to do some on-site visits. So we're trying to slowly get to a place where we can better equip some of the facilities and better monitor what's going on and not have these legacy systems. I hope that helps a little bit.
So no change. This is just status quo. And is it even needed? All right. So if it's like kind of like the same stuff in the same place, but we have changed kind of like some warehouses and reconsolidated I always recall, council spent $1 million to have the big Massaro, I think, assessment of the 300 to 400 city facilities, from everything from dugouts to, city county building and things like that. And when you call it burglar alarms, I mean, that's really changed for a lot of people, even at our homes, right? Where we don't necessarily see the same level of your old kind of like wires running to a windowsill to see if it's opened. I mean, is that what we're talking about here?
Well, in some cases, Councilwoman, yes. And I would say that the need is real. We've had facilities that have been accessed on Christmas Eve and, senior centers kind of vandalized. We've had those incidents when one of those kind of analog, antiquated wire system switches gets triggered, it sends a call to Sonatrol and then they call out staff. Okay. So our staff is really,
it's working.
It's working. Where we have it, it works. There are, like I said, there are upgrades that are needed. There are system glitches and there are improvements of the infrastructure that need to happen. But where we have these things, we feel like we need them. And working alongside of Dan Shack and public safety and getting some understanding of what their shot spotters do, where they are at, there's a need for these in areas where we don't have them. We've had some issues recently up at Arlington Spray Park. We've had issues at Brookline Rec Center. And while we're still in a COVID holding pattern relative to having full programming at our rec and senior centers, we're not there as much as we usually are. And we've seen a spike in these kind of activities. Okay. That's, it's straining public works to respond. It's straining others to, and there's been some really, some messaging out there that none of us in the community would want to see. So I think if we are able to work towards solidifying some capital monies to maybe do a proof of concept test, that's what we're talking about, to see what a new system could look like that might be supported on the back end by public safety and how they're able to manage that. So we're kind of in the preliminary stages of those conversations, but right now, what we have is what we need to have. We just don't have all that we need to have, if that makes sense.
Sure, absolutely does. And you're reminding me of a couple of things that Interim Director Norman from IMP had a fantastic presentation at budget season with all of the kind of hardware and with the kind of great graphics of kind of what levels of investment are needed and the kind of sequencing of the investments to get us there. And I was very impressed that there has been some assessment of, you can't put some places, any smart technology in place if there's no backbone for it.
That's correct.
Right. So to figuring out what's where. So that makes me feel better. We have requests for cameras in some places that we're not able to meet the requests. On the other hand, I know there are constituents out there who would not want cameras some places, right, and have concerns about technology and monitoring. And so there's a public conversation that needs to be had about deploying these things in other places. But we do want to make sure that the facilities are secure. And I just have to say, you reminded me of walking through a facility with Director Hornstein now, more than a year ago, because we've been in lockdown for a year. So the year before that, where we opened a closet in an empty city building in the Strip District. And we were all surprised. We really didn't know that it was going to be, it was full of wires. It was like, were you there? I don't think you were there. It was full of wires. Like you probably couldn't have put your hands around all of it, or arms around all of it. And they were all kind of like telephone wires. But it was like part of what is our current backbone.
Yes.
Think like early dial-up internet connections, if you're old enough to remember them, because I am. And that's deeply concerning, right? And so I'm sure that's kind of incorporated into Dr. Norman, right? Norman, sorry, part of what is a capital budget project that we need to do. Yeah, there are some fragile parts to our system that really limit how effective technology and kind of software investments would be until we have the hardware investments. So okay, I'm supportive of this. This is a small dollar amount. It's frustrating that it's kind of 1980s, 1990s status quo, but thank you for your information. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else from members? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Bill is recommended. That takes us to our last committee of the day, Intergovernmental Affairs Committee, chaired by Councilwoman Gross. First new paper is Bill 1348.
Bill 1348, resolution authorizing the intergovernmental cooperation agreement between the city and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Transportation to establish ownership and maintenance responsibility for a flood early warning system within the right-of-ways of Washington Boulevard, Allegheny River Boulevard, Butler Street, Highland Drive, and further amending resolution number 797, effective December 28, 2017, as amended, resolution adopting and approving the 2018 capital budget and the 2018 CDBG program and the 2018 through 2023 capital improvement program by increasing flood control projects by $170,899.79 to reflect reimbursement of previously expanded city funds.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Bill is recommended. Bill 1349.
Bill 1349, resolution approving an amendment to the Articles of Incorporation of the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority to establish the size of the board of the authority at a number not less than 5 and not more than 9.
Motion to approve with discussion.
Second.
Thank you. This is back to our meeting a few weeks ago when we had the nominees for the board members, and we were informed by our law department after questioning our how it comported with the State Municipal Authorities Act, specifically Section 5605. And so it looks like within days of that discussion, back in March, the PWSA did do a board resolution. I mention it specifically because that Section 5605 says that the authority is to take the exact same language that they approve as a board and put that in forward in front of the governing body. And so that is the language we see here. And I have a couple of things up on my screen. And I'm going to acknowledge that I think I am the board member or the council member here who always says this. But I have in front of me, just side by side, the TWSA language and the language that's in front of us. So I'm gonna, if you'll indulge me for just a second, I think I can get these both up at the same time. Shift to hold multiple windows. It's not working for me. So I'll just read them instead. How to get out of this. It says, can you still see me or are you seeing screens?
See you.
Okay, thank you. Let me close that. It simply says at the PWSA board meeting, now therefore be it resolved, the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority that in accordance with the act, the authority hereby proposes and approves an amendment of its articles of incorporation by adding a section thereto to read as follows. Quote, the board of the authority shall consist of a number of members not less than 5 and not more than 9. Section 2, the board of the authority hereby directs that this amendment be submitted to the governing authorities of the city, which shall adopt or reject such amendment by resolution or ordinance. Section 3, the proper officers of the authority are hereby authorized to execute this resolution and to take all such other action as may be required or which they may deem appropriate to amend the articles of incorporation consistent with this resolution. And it was adopted on the 26th of March this year. And then, so if you look at our Legistar language, I won't read it again, it reads exactly the same. And so that is what was required by Section 5605. It also further requires that the authority, I think, do then an advertisement after we either accept or reject. And if we accept, they have to advertise it somehow. I'm not sure exactly how. And then prove that they advertised it and then send that those records and our approval to the Department of State, which is the Secretary of the Commonwealth here in Pennsylvania. I have a couple of questions and concerns about expanding the size of the board. We will all recall that we had a number of years ago a mayor's blue ribbon panel of discussing governance for PWSA. We have basically rejected all of the recommendations. We did not create a private corporation, nonprofit trust to house the authority. We, as a body, did not entertain takeover attempts or purchase attempts. We, as a body, and the PWSA board, and I voted on committing to keep the authority public in both assets and in operations. And a reminder that privatization sometimes means selling the hard assets, but also sometimes privatization means giving an operating lease so that the control of a public asset is in private hands, such as was the case under the Veolia contract, where there were direct Veolia employees who were in the top of the organizational chart at PWSA back in 2012, 2013, 2014, before we terminated the lease and then sued them. And so the notion of expanding the board to include more citizen input is, I think, part and parcel of those other recommendations. That there be basically, there was something about it being a public authority under city council control that had somehow led it astray. And I object to that kind of story categorically. Absolutely. Having served as an elected official now for 7 or so years, and having served with you all, and having seen the city right itself in terms of its budget problems, and seeing the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority right itself of its budget problems and correct the mistakes that were made by a private corporation. It was done with public input at the public table, at this table, the city council table, even though we're only here digitally. And it was done by us being elected by the citizens of Pittsburgh and hearing from them as elected officials, the way no board member of a private corporation hears. I don't get calls from citizens about the library. I don't get calls from citizens about the zoo. I get calls every day, as all of us do, about the city and about city authorities. And while I respect a great deal the PWSA board members that I served with who were private citizens, they very often resisted or objected to the reality that I was presenting them, that I was hearing from my constituents. And so that's concerning to me. It took board members at PWSA a year to believe that there was a problem with the billing system. Not because they are not good people, not because they weren't earnestly trying to do the right thing, but because they didn't get the calls and the emails. Some of you may recall that there was, after many, many months of frustration, I asked you to send your emails and phone calls to each and every of the PWSA board members, all in the same day, because I was going into another board meeting and I couldn't convince them myself, and they needed to see, and some of you did, send dozens of emails to each of the board members. So much so that by the time I got to the meeting, they had received about 100 from various council districts. And then they said, oh, that was a cute move, but guess what? They heard it. And we also had to invite them into numerous public hearings and post agendas in order to get the message through that there was clearly something wrong. And this all led up to our joint credit, this led up to the board then deciding to terminate that lease with Veolia. On top of the problems with water quality. So I believe that I'm concerned that while we want an increased public input and we want it from a variety of voices, and we need to hear from all of the either marginalized communities or the public that isn't being heard and needs to be represented in these choices, that is our responsibility. That is exactly what the city council of the city of Pittsburgh is here to do. And so that falls on us, and we shouldn't be kind of just delegating that somehow. And furthermore, I am not sure, and I've asked our Secretary of the Commonwealth's office if there are other authorities in the state of Pennsylvania with over 7 members. I just don't know. And so I don't know if there's anyone here from the administration who knows kind of like how many authorities are there across the Commonwealth, and are they all 7 members or under, or is there some great range, and so that my concerns are somehow misplaced. And so if anyone is, I don't know who's on the line, honestly. Let me look at the participants list. Who is, I don't know who from the administration kind of sent this legislation over. There's no directors that are obvious to me. Mr. Chair, do you know who sent this bill over?
Do not know. We do have law with us, but I don't think it was them.
Well, maybe we can get someone over who is, I assume there's somebody who, because it does say the mayor, the city solicitor, and city clerk are hereby authorized to check for the steps, but that's not the city clerk who sent the bill over. So I'll wait, but just to summarize, I think the suggestion, came from the panel, and is part and parcel of the kind of recommendations to privatize. And so I don't see any good reason to do that, because we have rejected most of the other recommendations there. I do understand the spirit of it, and I certainly don't object to any of the people that we interviewed. I did go to the interview, and they are all people I know, I like, I respect. They have great backgrounds. But I do have concerns that moving into a larger board is just a way of kind of deflecting responsibility away from the city council table. And I don't support that spirit. And so the moving any one of our authorities into being more like one of the big nonprofit boards, I have personally been turned away at trying to get into a nonprofit board meeting. I know that citizens are not invited into nonprofit board meetings. And so the spirit, right, of that, even though the authority would remain a public authority, that spirit of kind of putting private citizens in charge is not something I support. I'll stop there, Mr. Chair. If we can try to get someone from the administration, I would appreciate it.
Councilwoman, are you asking who crafted the legislation? It was crafted by Solicitor Hilton. And so her staff, there is someone, Anthony Biden, on the line.
Okay, well, I can ask and maybe they can answer my questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I don't see who that is. I'm sorry.
Anthony Byland.
Oh, Mr. Byland.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Byland, are you there? Please come to the table, the Zoom table.
Begging your pardon, I had to unmute my phone. Anthony Byland from City Law Department.
Thank you, Mr. Byland. We all know how that is. So I have this basic question, which is that, do you know if there is an authority in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania with more than 7 members?
I do not have the answer to that question.
Okay, so
but that's not to say that
I didn't ask that question. We can all read the Municipal Authorities Act and we see that it says that it must be at least 5. But I am curious whether in reality, in fact, are there any with more than 7? And I have asked that question to the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office, and I've been harassing them this week and doing follow-up phone calls, and I haven't gotten the answer yet, but I was just curious whether you knew. So that's my main concern. I didn't suspect that you were the right person to answer it, but it's good to know that the legislation came from the law department.
My understanding, or rather my, well, in truth, I'm not sure if I have enough information to opine on this, but I'm not aware that this legislation was sponsored by or introduced by the law department. So I can't confirm to that.
The nominations.
I'm aware that the law department performed some, we did review on legislation as we do on multiple pieces of legislation, but as far as who introduced, I'm not able to speak to that.
But we had 3 nominees 2 weeks ago,
Yes, the nominees are submitted by the mayor's office. I think Herschel, the mayor's office submit all nominees. So, but the legislation I'm understanding from the mayor's office was crafted by the solicitor.
I don't want to put Councilman Strasburger on the spot, but perhaps we have to ask this question then, like, whose idea is this really? Like, who is advocating for the increased size of the board is probably a fair question for the public to know. Because it's not normal and it is new. And in the, 30 some years of us having so many different authorities where we kind of spun off city departments into authorities, this hasn't happened. So it feels like it's not something we rubber stamp here. And there should be some ownership of it. I'm certainly not supportive unless I can hear someone make a good case for it. So I'll stop there, Mr. Chair, for now, in case there are other members who want to say something.
Thank you. Are there any other members? Councilman Strasburger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Councilwoman Gross brought up a number of items. Just quickly before I forget, the process from here is that if we were to approve this and it were to be signed by the mayor, then it would need to be advertised. And you had questions about, sorry, Councilwoman Gross had questions about where it would be advertised. That would be the Legal Journal and the Post-Gazette is where it would need to be advertised. And then it would go to the Department of State and likely wouldn't take more than a couple of days to make it through the Department of State's process. So just on the timing question. On the question of where this originated, I would say that it's been a conversation point with the executive committee of the PWSA board, as well as board members themselves, as the PWSA board has welcomed several new board members over the last year and a half. There have been questions about diversity of all sorts, so ethnic, gender, geographic diversity, and an acknowledgement that with 7 members, it's challenging, especially with geographic diversity, when the question when board members candidates come to the table and every council member says, well, where do you live? How come I don't have representation in my part of town? An acknowledgement that having 9 board members would not only allow for more diversity and more and a diversity in experience too, and a background, but would allow for more people from different parts of town in the service area, and also to have that citizen representation. So a lot of concerns we hear from council members during interviews also is, well, I don't feel like you're a real person, or are you really experiencing the things that the people who are calling our offices are experiencing? And I would make the case that just because this would be an expansion of the board members to the same level that, say, city council has, that the scenario that played out a few years ago, with Councilwoman Gross's leadership on both the board and on council, to when council members are receiving huge amounts of concerned calls and emails, I would argue that process could still take place. That process of advocacy from council to the board would still happen, would still be necessary, and will always be a part of the strategy that's needed. Regardless of how many sort of real citizens you put on any board, there's always going to be the necessity for city council to advocate as necessary to say, we're the ones getting the calls, please listen to us. And I would hope that any future council member who's serving on the board would help to play that role. Certainly, I'm committed to doing so in my current role. If I hear from all of you that there's an issue, as I currently do, whether it's your part of town or whether it's a more systemic issue, I'm certainly going to be advocating on your behalf at the board and with PWSA leadership. So I don't think that changes with, in reality. I understand the spirit of it, but in reality, I don't think that dynamic changes. I think all that this does is increase the number of people to allow for more diversity on the all sorts, and that's a good thing. We have more ability to do that on city council with 9 board members, and the same would be true for PWSA. I'm unsure of whether Councilwoman Gross's question was about the number of people who serve on an authority anywhere in the state, or whether it was a public utility overseen authority. But just in looking at the County Port Authority website, it looks as if they have 11 members. So there certainly is precedent for some authorities to have more than 7 members. But again, I wasn't sure if that was a question more geared toward public utility governed authorities, of which I think the PWSA is unique in that position. So I think that was all the questions I heard. I'm happy to stop talking now, see if there are any responses.
Thank you. Other members? Councilman. Crum-
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I will vote in favor of this today. I'll reserve my right to perhaps maybe, consider additional information before Tuesday. I believe that the board is not unruly in any way. I think 9 is still very much a manageable board. Which, as Councilwoman Strasburger commented, opens up the opportunity for a more diverse representation, which I think all of us on the boards that we serve on are struggling to provide for. And so I just don't see the board becoming unmanageable. I don't see it becoming too big. I like that it provides for opening seats for a broader representation and a more diversified board. So I am supporting today, reserve my right to perhaps reconsider, but I don't see much that would change my mind, might broaden my perspective, I hope, but I'm happy to vote in support today. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members? Second round, Councilwoman Gross.
Thank you. So we all probably serve on boards that are just mainly private citizens. But we serve there because we are public officials, most of us, right? There may be some boards that we served on before we were council members. I served on the board of a Pittsburgh History and Landmarks Foundation subsidiary called the Landmarks Corporation, and it excludes public officials. So when I got elected, they had to ask me to leave that board. So bylaws are written in different ways for sure. Again, there are private corporation boards that specifically exclude public officials, and there are private corporation boards that specifically include public officials. But we're not talking about a private corporation here. This is a municipal authority, and it is supposed to have representation from public officials. What changes is the strength of your voice on that board as the public official. I'm actually doubly concerned by the increase in the size of the board, as well as what I don't see, which is I don't see the city's budget or finance director or treasurer on the board. I believe it wasn't, in this mayoral administration, we kind of split the budget and finance directors, if I recall, early in my tenure. And there's also, for a while though, then we had a combined treasurer and finance director. So that there's kind of 3 different roles in the city government that now are held by 3 different people, and they haven't been held by 3 different people in the past. And not one of them is on the board, and that has also been traditional at PWSA. Given especially that among all of the authorities, there's probably the most public debt, and especially also given the legacy of PWSA very specifically among all the other authorities that it was really created almost like a shell corporation to off book $100 million of city debt. So one of the things we've talked about at this table before that I didn't know until I served in this role, but that I learned was that when it was created in 1985, it was really created with like no personnel, no operating budget. And on its very first day, it had $100 million in debt because I guess the city council just kind of like moved $100 million of debt off of the city's accounts and into this kind of shell authority. And so, you know, it started with, you know, in a negative position from the very beginning, but it has really righted itself again, due to, I think, the many, many, many hours of conversations and public oversight that our table has highlighted and kind of spotlighted and invited the public into the conversation to strengthen PWSA and really to strengthen water service and protect the citizens' investment. I always like to remind everyone that the citizens of Pittsburgh paid for, you know, every inch of that water system. And it is rightfully theirs. And so given the story that I told about how it took a year, even with council members' voices and holding post agendas and public hearings, I think Councilwoman Smith called for the one about billing. She was certainly the first member who stopped me in the hall and said, I'm getting complaints about water bills. You know, what are you hearing? And I said, I have not heard a single complaint from my district, not one, but I want to know and hear what you're hearing. And because the billing system failed kind of geographically in a geographic rollout, almost like a brownout electrical system does, it was literally kind of in the physical system so that her district really was seeing billing issues, but our other districts had not. So she was the first one. And then it was really some weeks or months later, I started getting calls specifically from Bloomfield of the 8 neighborhoods that I represent, because it was a rolling geographic like failure. And I immediately told her, my God, I'm suddenly flooded with calls about billing, because even though I was one voice of 7, it still took a great deal of heavy lifting and persuasion to get the private citizens to hear what I was hearing. My concern is that, especially with the removal of yet another public official, right? And so now we have one council member. There's no state rep, which was also traditional as an elected. And there's no either treasurer or finance director, but then we're adding these private citizens who, again, I have not a single bad thing to say against any single one of them. They're all wonderful, dutiful, good citizens with great resumes. I worry about what I see as the dilution of kind of citizen involvement by the removal. So while it's being portrayed as like more citizen involvement, because we are elected officials who people, you know, stop on the street, stop us when they're in, you know, our own front yard, stop us at the grocery store, because we are fully staffed and receive calls and emails every day of the year, that we really are the elected voices of our citizens, and that those board members are not. So that is my concern, and I am not supportive of the expansion of the board. I have concerns about it, and I would like to have more facts in front of us. And I don't think that we should take this vote lightly. I would rather see a public hearing about it, and maybe a post agenda, since I have really technical questions as well. Again, there must be hundreds of authorities in the Commonwealth. And really, since there's so many hundreds of municipalities, and we are a highly incorporated state, which has lots and lots and lots of local governments and lots of small local governments, I suspect that there are a great number of authorities, and I'm curious. Maybe they all have like 30 members and it works just perfectly fine. Or maybe they don't. And this is something that is not heard of. And I'm curious about that. And I'm also curious why no one kind of knows that. And if this is, I wish that someone maybe at law or the mayor's office or PWSA knew whether this was something that is, how abnormal is it? But those are kind of my outstanding questions, and I am not supportive today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
You muted yourself, Count.
Sorry. Any further discussion from members? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
Abstain.
One abstention, one opposed.
Abstain to, 2 abstentions.
2 abstentions, 1 opposed. Bill receives an affirmative recommendation. That does exhaust our agenda for today. We do have some meeting announcements. Excuse me. Next week, council will hold their regular and standing committee meetings on Tuesday and Wednesday, April 13th and 14th at 10 a.m. To speak at these meetings, please register online using the sign-up form on the council meeting schedule webpage by 9 a.m. the morning of the meeting. Also, next week, council will host 2 Cablecast public hearings. The first hearing is on Tuesday, April 13th at 1:30 p.m. on Bill 1231 as it relates to conditional use application for 2142 Whiteman. The second hearing will be Wednesday, April 14th at 1:30 p.m. on Bill 1339 relative to a petition to move the money from the military budget and invest in social programs and human needs. To register for the public hearings, please fill out the sign-up form on the council meeting schedule webpage by 11:30 a.m. the day of the hearing. You may also to register to speak at any of these meetings by calling the city clerk's office at 412-255-2138. Is there anything from members? Seeing none, we need a motion to approve the minutes and adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 We are adjourned.